All right, welcome to Roots of Reality Experiences. I'm joined by Tony Scalzo, who is the bassist and vocalist of the Grammy-nominated band Fastball, who is best known for their hit songs "The Way" and "Out of My Head" from their platinum-selling album "All the Pain Money Can Buy." So, Tony, thanks for coming on today.
Hi, thank you.
So, just to begin, when did you first get interested in music?
Um, it's funny. I think I was already playing piano and having piano lessons as a young boy before I realized that I was really that I liked music. I think that's maybe because I just assumed music was a part of, everyday existence. Um, I don't remember too much music other than maybe the organ at church or whatever was on the television, like cartoons and TV shows like Gilligan's Island. Those are songs to me at that time. And after a while, I started becoming conscious of the radio. And, you know, at about the time I was maybe 8 or 9, I started being attracted to the radio and finding my own listening habits and listening to records that I got for birthdays or Christmas. My parents would I remember one Christmas they got us the entire Disney movie record set, and it had like all these record albums from like Mary Poppins or Peter and the Wolf, 101
Oh, wow.
Dalmatians, that kind of thing. So those were a big deal. And me and my sister, who's only a couple years younger, we started getting really obsessive about music. And she played the violin and I played the piano. And by the time I was 10, I was already like way into the Beatles and way into the music that my friend and I discovered through his older brother. So he had an older brother in Southern California who had all this, and we're talking about 1972, 1974. So he had records, amazing records by like Emerson, Lake and Palmer and Pink Floyd and maybe Frank Zappa and Yes. And those were the first bands that I started really like obsessing on, like kind of a progressive rock situation, right? Um, but as time went on, I realized I probably wasn't going to be able to play that kind of music. Even though I have a classical music background, I wouldn't even attempt to try and be one of those proggy muso types. I just I get bored too
Yeah,
quickly having to learn and apply myself and that intensive study to be able to play, you know, beyond the kind of rudimentary rock and roll that I I'll give you that I think that Fastball's music tends to go a little bit more sophisticated than your average like AC/DC or a hard rock
sure.
band.
Right.
But for the most part, we're doing the same thing. And I don't think the Beatles were really doing anything other than what their ability allowed them to do. And their ability also has to do with who they chose to work with and who they said, well, I'm limited. I can't play the piano like you can, Billy Preston. So will you come in and do this? And Fastball sort of has a background of finding people who can do what we're hearing in our heads and bringing them in, kind of like a Steely Dan thing. But again, I don't think we're as musically sophisticated as Steely Dan, although we sort of lean in the direction of like more complex chords and arrangements. And we want our lyrics to be a little bit, thought provoking if possible, or,
Definitely.
you
Yeah.
know, we're not just trying to like just knock them out. We've never done that really. Um, I don't know how far you want me to go with
As far as you want. I mean,
free form. Yeah.
it's no, I mean, it's interesting that you mentioned that about like the lyrics, especially because that's something I've always noticed whenever I listen to your music is that, there's actual, I mean, like the take the way, for example, like this is a song that clearly has some interesting meanings that people can interpret from it. You could probably go into details about like the how you came up with that song,
Mhm.
but there's a lot of music that's kind of has like a very generic tone about maybe it's some type of love interest someone has, and that theme is like seems to be the most common that you'll find. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. And it's common with us as well. There's a whole there's a few love songs, things like that in our past repertoire. Um, I don't think any of it's super generic. I think some of it is a product of its time. Like our first album is like super pop punk type. If you were to call it anything, it's basically that. Bands like Urge Overkill and Green Day and I don't know, Everclear. Those were bands that were happening at that time. And I think we were sort of like falling into that zone, or at least, that's where it looked like we were headed. And yet we put out that album, Make Your Mama Proud, in 1994 or 95. And then by the time it was time to do a follow up, our next record was All the Pain Money Can Buy. And that record was much more, it was like going from Meet the Beatles to like Rubber Soul, as far as like what went into it and how we appear. I think we appear much more mature and adult on our second album, while the first album sounds like we're just getting our driver's licenses,
yeah,
you
I
know?
mean, how do you, when you're starting a band, like how do you figure out what type of music you want to make? Because obviously, I mean, the rock genre or whatnot.
that's that's funny.
Yeah,
I'm sorry you wanted to elaborate on it, but I got the question, I got the gist of
no,
it.
go for it.
And the fact is, uh, we have our own tastes, and some of our tastes, it's like, one of those graphs, I forget what they call them, but whatever the common ground is, we have that. And like I like a lot of stuff that Miles might not like, and he tends to like a lot of mainstream stuff for me. And maybe that's a sort of ego thing for me, but I'm like, I can't be bothered. It's too famous, it's too whatever, and I want to try and dig for what I'm like the more hipster, you know, and I think that's the way I think I am anyways. So I tend to go for a deeper cachet of influences, and so we draw from those things that we feel we have a commonality with. And also, I think in the past we're like, whatever, man, well, let's try this because we like all different kinds of music. So, if it works, we do it. If it's a country-ish song, there's no way I'd ever introduce our band as a country band. However, it's within our realm
Yeah,
musically, without a doubt. Um, all three of us grew up with country music. Um, and, you know, we just do what, might help us. I believe the police is a good example because, we all know what the police are capable of as musicians. They're as good as anybody in like Yes or Gentle Giant or something like that. And yet they needed to do something that they knew would have mass appeal. So what did they do? They reduced the formula down to three guys. Let's make this simple. Let's make this hooky and all that stuff. They just could do no wrong at that time. Their trajectory was straight up. And by the time they became a very big band, it was time to stop. It's
yeah,
time to quit. And here they are. I think they're one of the most streamed artists today. And yet,
definitely.
they were only together for like 5 or 6 years. Isn't that crazy?
It is insane. Well, I mean, that's the funny thing because I feel like for so many bands, there's a long process of trying to figure out like, okay, who are we? What are we doing? And then, until that point where they become successful, because there's several years I feel like where bands are just kind of toying with ideas until they really figure out who they are.
Yes, yes. And yes, we've done a fair amount of that too. So I think there's all kinds of, you know, factors that create, the ongoing evolution of what we're doing, what we're playing. Um, I think no matter what we choose to like shoot for, it's always going to end up sounding like us. Um, we have a pretty strong attraction, all three of us, to keeping things sort of, I don't know, real, like it based in reality, like your
Yeah.
show. Um, Instead of like pretending we're something else.
Yeah,
Like,
that's always good. It makes the bands I also feel like more relatable, more approachable. Um, I think there's always can kind of be a danger of like if you, especially bands that get so famous where they someone who just becomes like a pop star where
right.
you kind of start to lose yourself in the process because your life is so different than any normal life would be.
That's true. And you're surrounded by people who say, yeah, you're a genius. What a great idea. You've done it again. And, how can you really grow with that all around you? You have to open up yourself to, you know, not just outside criticism, but self-criticism. And you have to look at things. And it really helps me to go back and listen to our music every once in a while. Go through the catalog and go, wow, I was really young, or I was really stupid then. I saw something on some meme about how anybody who thinks the way they did, the same way they did when they were 20 at the age of 50, has wasted 30 years of their life.
Yeah,
I don't know who said that, but someone like Mark Twain or
yeah,
Einstein or something.
some person with some wisdom there in the
Some
literature
smart
world.
guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm curious then, thinking about this when you're starting out a band, what was the 90s music scene like as a whole? What were the bands you kind of felt like, okay, these are kind of the groups that maybe were interested in kind of getting to the point that they're at right now, or maybe these are
Uh,
some sounds that we're kind of interested in.
okay. This might take a minute.
Go for it.
So I spent the first part of the 90s getting ready to move away from Southern California, where I'd grown up. And all through the 80s and into the 90s, it was obviously a vibrant place with all kinds of stuff going on. And we had alternative rock radio before any place in the country. So we had, you know, I mean, sure, the rest of the country had college radio and things like that, but we had literally commercial alternative rock, which they called, rock of the 80s, like K Rock in
Yeah.
Los Angeles. So, a lot going on. Plus, we could go up to San Francisco, we could go up to Seattle or Phoenix, and there was all kinds of bands. And it was a punk thing that really where I'm getting at. It was an underground DIY punk thing, mainly hardcore, which it started out really great and fun and neat and smart. And then obviously because it's an aggressive form of music, it began to become very male, very knucklehead, and sort of a jock kind of thing. And so that meant that people started going away from that, who had more broader interests. So you started having things like a mod scene, which is weird because it's the 80s, it's not the 60s in London, but it's a mod scene that has like some bands played blues, some bands played ska, right? So then there's this weird, I don't know how mod and ska kind of happen if you're going from a historical point of view.
Sure.
It's very odd call. And yet uh, there was like uh, what did they call it? Punk, country. Well, they had all kinds of names for it before Americana became the tag, but there was cowpunk, right? So you had people like Mojo Nixon and Rank and File and these bands that you would recognize some people from because they've moved on. And even the band X started going into a more roots Americana vibe, and there was bands like the Blasters. And so, those that wanted to go to weird places did. And then that hardcore thing just sort of stayed where it was or whatever. It was very weird. But by the mid 80s, you saw more mainstream acceptance of weird ideas. Bands like the Red Hot Chili Peppers were just starting to get out on national level.
Right.
Videos started having, like MTV started having 120 minutes. Okay, so that's a big, huge influence for most of the people that are from my age group, is that we all um, were tuned into that. We were still young enough to want to figure out what it is, like we're talking about. What are we going to do? And so there was so many things and so many choices that it became more interesting to try to maybe get back to basics. So a lot of my friends started getting more into a basic rock kind of thing, influenced by bands from the 60s and 70s, like the MC5 and the Stooges. And there were bands from the 70s like the Saints and um, the Dead Boys, and a more garage rock kind of thing. And that's what I was really getting into, was this hard. I was in a band called Electric Kool-Aid, and that band started out, before I was even in the band, started out as kind of like a crazy psychedelic post-punk young guy band.
Yeah.
And it evolved, and their lead singer left and went to college, and I became the new lead singer. And as I did that, we became a four-piece and turned it into a more definitely straight ahead rock and roll sound. Okay. And then I started writing songs to kind of fit that thing. So what you have is me coming from early in my days, classical music, progressive rock, and then, punk and new wave and heavy metal. But I had always this Beatle thing going on, and Nirvana was happening at the time, which we noticed. Kurt Cobain had a way of throwing hooks into this aggressive four chord song, and that's really what my appeal was, and that's what my motive was try to get these hooky ass songs onto uh, a hard rock format with big amps and loud drums. And
Sure.
you know as Fastball began to tour and travel around in a van after I'd moved to Austin, we started realizing that we didn't want to do this forever. Didn't want to lug giant amps in a van. We wanted to play more interesting and diverse music. So we wanted to play different styles. We wanted to bring it down a little bit sometime, because I honestly believe that dynamics are a big part of the appeal of music. And that's why people like Nirvana. One of the things was like, play quiet, play quiet, play loud. It's
Yeah.
like,
That's exactly it.
so, what is that? That's dynamics. And, we wanted to do that on a more album oriented level. So, you have a hard song, you have a mid-tempo song with a nice melody, or you have a really soft ballad, or maybe you have a country song or R&B song. So, that's how the culture kind of influenced us. By the time we were going in to do our second album, which was the one that really brought us to success, we we were like, okay, thank you, popular culture. We'll take it from here, and we just kind of like embraced, all eras of popular culture, at least American popular culture and British popular culture. So that's when we started doing things like Burt Bacharach songs and, you know, bringing in a mariachi orchestra to the studio,
Sure.
having somebody play vibes or an oboe, a lot of B3 organ, a lot of uh, steel guitar, lap steel, pedal steel, um, and basically just riffing off the record collections and going with, let's try this, let's try this. And it's been fun and gratifying. And we were 30 years in, and I'm digging it still, more so because I have more time to think, and I'm also, wow, plus access to where you had to think about a record before you could like get it. You had to
Sure.
like, sure would like to hear the rest of that record. And now it's like, okay, there it is. And that can hurt people a little bit. And I'll explain that in a minute. But it's helped me because I need the access and I need instantaneous access. I need to know if an idea that I'm working on isn't a total ripoff of some song that I think that this might be this song, So I check. And if it's you know, dissimilar enough, then I'll keep going with the idea. And so also I think that we tend to get locked into log algorithms.
Right.
And how do you escape? It's a tricky thing sometimes to escape your music streaming algorithm.
That's
And
true. Yeah.
sometimes I just go nuts for a couple of hours on something that's completely off the off the chain of what I've been doing, right?
Yeah.
So the other day I discovered, oh my gosh, I hope I get her name right. Mary
Hmm.
Nagana from the 60s. In 1965, she put out a folk record, and she had a hit single with a song called Me and My Cat Named Dog.
Wow.
So I listened to the entire album and I found it amazing and refreshing and so different. I recommend it. I think that's her name. Anyway, and that hopefully things like that offset the algorithm
Sure.
and make it so that you can branch off into other things so you can get new ideas instead of being stuck. Her name is Norma Tanega.
Okay.
She was from Los Angeles and her father was Filipino. So
Wow.
Tanega is where she gets her name. And the name of the song is Walking My Cat Named Dog.
That's
So
interesting.
I was like, that looks, and that's what I said. And the opening track is a song called You're Dead, You're Dead, You're Out of This World. And I'm like, wow, this is crazy.
Isn't that's interesting. I feel like I've heard that song. That's from that's I think a TV show theme
I,
song.
I believe I
Yeah.
hope she's still alive because I really hope that she benefits from usage of her material because
Yes, yes, that's right. It's like What We Do in the Shadows, I believe
I
is the
didn't get
show.
far enough on her bio to find out, but
Yeah.
never heard of her until yesterday. And I don't know why it popped up on my thing, but I try things that are held up before me sometimes.
Yeah. No, that's a always fun and interesting. I mean, it's amazing also today, like how you can now come across music that no one would have ever thought about if it wasn't for, just the platform we have now compared to just being the radio in the past where people would find songs.
Yeah, and I think that there should be, I hope there are, thousands of interesting artists that are out there that are, it's hard to get through because it's like now we're in a school of fish
Yep.
that's massive. And, it used to be just, there's someone over there, and oh, I know that guy.
Yeah.
Everybody used to know everybody. If you were a touring band in the 80s, you had friends all over the country because you knew everybody. You knew people in Florida, up in Ohio, and there was only a couple hundred bands that were doing that.
Right.
And now there's thousands and thousands, and some never go, and they're lame. You got to go. If you're in a band and you play live music, get away from where you are
Yeah,
and
that's
go
true.
somewhere else. Bring it to the people,
Yeah.
because you may get a little modicum of success in your little hamlet, right? But what is that ultimately? Move, go somewhere, try something, learn from the outside world.
Yeah, I mean I feel like that's a kind of a quintessential aspect of like a musician kind of exploring and kind of it's like a figuring out process of who you are as a musician by doing that journey.
Right. But it's the kind of everybody has that. Everybody evolves, everybody grows. If they don't, they tend to be unhealthy, unhappy, or dead. Right. So we all grow, but an artist documents it in some way, right? A graphic artist will have a body of work that you can see an evolution. It may not correspond directly to what's going on. You might not be able to interpret it as that artist intended, and that's no matter because that's why people become those kind of artists, I believe, especially the more abstract visual artists.
Yeah.
But poetry, same thing. You can be poet. You can be a literal poet who's speaking to a specific subject, or you can speak to that subject in a very um, abstract way, and that way your stuff gets interpreted in all manner of ways, and that's cool. That's really cool.
Yes.
Um, and music is another uh, potentially abstract form that, especially if it's instrumental music or music that's not in your language, right? I think it's very important to listen to music that either has no lyrics or words or is sung in a foreign to you language, because then you could get your own ideas about what's being said. And it's actually can be more fulfilling that way, and I tend to look, I'm going to jump to Bob Dylan because Bob Dylan, he doesn't really ever make me feel unsatisfied as far as what I'm getting from his work. However, I tend to sometimes fall into the thought that I'm only listening to words, and that's absolutely not the reality of it. The reality of it is he's singing. He's singing, which is a different thing than writing or speaking. He's singing. He's putting it into an American musical form that's only about 150, maybe 200 years. American and English and Scottish and Irish. The rest is mainly uh, incidental because it's all basically just European, Western European culture and American. And so he's specifically, there, and you think that's all there is to it, but he's got to sing it in these forms. He's got to put it in that package to make it come off as a song, and that creates the whole piece.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I hope I made my point without too much
No, I mean, I think it,
circumlocution.
yeah, no, I think that's a really good thought, especially also, mentioning foreign music. Like today is, I feel like, a great opportunity for so many people to find foreign music that they never would have been able to discover before without traveling to another country.
That's true.
Because it's
Let's
all
take a
online
look at
now.
let's take a look at one of a few of the largest acts going right now. Mdu Mokhtar. Do you know who that is?
I've heard the name. I'm not too
Okay,
familiar with the work.
yeah, they're a sub-Saharan band from Niger,
Wow.
and they do not sing in English.
Yep.
I believe I'm not going to say what they sing in because I don't know if it's Arabic or some African. I think it's a tribal dialect. Okay, I'm already digging a hole, but they are very popular, and it's just this sort of groove-oriented rock. It's guitar. They play Stratocasters. They wear desert, gear,
Yep.
you know, and they are very popular. Another extremely popular touring band is Khruangbin from Houston, Texas.
Okay.
And so that's a three-piece. They've got a guitar player. His name is Mark Spear, and he plays guitar. His influences, because I know, because I have a background listening to some of the forms that he listens to, like African music from the 60s and 70s. Uh, he has that. So Sunny Ade and Roshiro and Franco and this sort of all that Afro pop stuff. So he's got that influences, but he also has an Eastern influence. So he listens to, Indian music and um, Southeast Asian music, so there's Cambodian type stuff in there. And they have a beautiful bass player who just grooves. She just stands there and grooves, and she always wears a different, amazing outfit every night. I will not deny I've had the hugest crush on her. Um, she she's married, has kids. I'm married, have kids. It's never going to happen, but I'm a big fan, and
Yeah.
she's a big part of it. And the drummer is killer. Bin with a K.
That's
Come on,
cool.
man.
Yeah. Look them
Tell
up.
your listeners all about them. They're big. And also this band, King Gizzard and the Wizard Lizard from Australia,
Oh,
from Perth,
wow.
Australia, one of the most isolated cities on the globe, by the way. Big Australia is where it's happening, by the way,
Yeah.
musically. If you want something vibrant and young and yet smart and fun, let's go to Australia because there's a ton of bands out there.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's
I've
happening.
seen some Australian musicians pop up a lot lately on like Instagram and stuff that seem to
Yep.
be doing pretty well. So,
Yeah. And they can leave and come to Europe and come to the United States and do very well. Um, yeah, so
that's interesting. I mean, so, thinking then about in your career when your band first came out with like the song The Way, did you guys really know like if that song was to be successful or not? Did you kind of
no.
have an idea that this might be your hit or
It was released as a single to radio as an afterthought.
okay. So,
We were in, also our label had just lost its president.
wow.
So it was a bunch of vice presidents. I'm not going to go into the structure of major labels in the late part of the 20th century, but
Sure.
just picture, if you will, big wig record executives, offices, right?
Yep.
walk past a pool of all these other people who are making the thing work, go into this office, have a meeting with these VPs, and you're talking about what are we going to have as a single. And we had a couple of things in mind. Sooner or later was bandied about. Um, for some reason, we decided to have, let's get on a conference call with our manager, Russell, out in Atlanta. Russell Carter was our manager at the time. And out of the blue, he suggested, what about that song, The Way? And we just all looked at each other, cocked our heads and said, okay, sure, why not? And it immediately started becoming a good idea. It was very weird and quick generating momentum, quickly generating momentum. And it fucking started moving as soon as we put it out there. We took it to like college radio in places like Birmingham and Sacramento, and they started getting all these calls at these radio stations. So then it started going to other markets. Next thing you know, K-Rock in Los Angeles has picked it up, and the label becomes an attractive hornet's nest of activity. People are drawn to it from other labels. Okay, so you get all these executives coming in from a different label to work at Hollywood Records just to work the Fastball record.
Wow.
And that's an army of people, by the way. When that happens, it's usually about 50 people
Yeah.
back then. Okay, this is
Yeah.
back then. And there's people all over the country at that time that would take you. You'd pick you up at the airport and go, hey, you got to go to the radio station. I'm going to take you guys to the radio station. We'll get some dinner. Then we'll go to the gig. And they would take you to 2 or 3 different radio stations. After the gig, great gig. See you in the morning. Got to go to the morning radio. And they take you to the radio. You go to another town, there's another person or 2. This is my assistant. And they, and you can't imagine the amount of revenue that they threw into stuff like that back then. Okay. Plus studios. You go to studio, record a record, say you're going to go to A&M Studios. In 1997, it cost $1,700 a day to work at A&M Studios. Okay, so you're there for how many days? 25 days?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, right. And then you're going to shoot a video, and you're going to use a production company that the director who you choose to be the director of your video works with, and then you get a budget for that video, and that video can be anywhere from $100,000 to $250,000. Okay.
Jeez.
But you already know, sort of, they already know that it's going to go to MTV, it's going to go to VH1, and you're going to go on TV all over. You're going to go to, Letterman. You're going to go to Conan O'Brien. You're going to go to Leno, hopefully.
Yeah.
It was all back in the day again. Believe me, I know what day it is. But we did all that stuff. We never got to do Saturday Night Live. That's okay. And we watched a lot of our peers over the years become some of the biggest bands in the world. Foo Fighters became massive.
Yeah.
Goo Goo Dolls, massive. And, some bands, not so massive, that's, and I feel like we're very fortunate to be like right in the sweet middle spot where you're not too big to screw your whole life up, right?
Yes. Yeah.
You know how you get on a skateboard and you go down a hill and you're
Yep.
going, man, I'm cruising. And all of a sudden it starts wobbling. And
Yeah.
you're like, you eat it.
That's
right?
true. That's true. There's
So
a
you can be too
balance.
big and too successful, and you could have people shoving drugs into your system, or it's ruining your relationship because you're gone all the time and your family's falling apart. Yeah, all those things can come into play, but if you can stay grounded and maybe concentrate on your work, do what you're supposed to do, and remember that it's fun, then I think that's a good way to go, because you end up having a long, fulfilling life that
Yeah.
way.
Yeah, I like that balance where you can still be yourself and also be successful at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have to go to work, but it's I live a pretty charmed life at this point right now.
Yeah.
I work hard when it's time to work. It's hard. Um, I'm not going to lie to you. As you get older, it becomes more difficult to go through airport security, to lug around a giant base and a suitcase full of merchandise,
Yeah.
not just my clothes. All I really need is two changes of clothes and my toiletries, right?
Sure.
But I have to take all these record albums, and then I have the base, which I have to check because it's just too big. And
Yeah.
I'm not going to walk around the airport with a, what kind of music do you play?
I know. Yeah. That makes total sense. Yeah. It's
Okay, so I've been doing it too long, and all that gets pretty hard. And then let's say there's a delay, or you got to change planes and your bag doesn't make it and your base doesn't make it to where you're going. That means if that happens enough in your career, you realize that you have to travel the day before the show.
yep.
You have to, which means you get to the hotel, you sit around, you find some place to eat, or you call Uber Eats or whatever, Grubhub. And then you wake up and then you got to do the show, and you do the show and it's great. And the trick is, people always want you should go check out this while you're in town. Go here while you're in town. It's like, no, I'm going to just sit here because I'm going to go to sound check. Then I'm going to get hungry. And then I'm going to play. And then I'm going to go say hi to people and sign stuff and take a picture or two. And then I'm going to go back to the hotels because I got to get the hell out of here.
Yeah.
Got to get on the next flight and go home.
Yep.
So a lot of what we do is one off or two off shows. Every year we try to get a proper tour where we're out for a few weeks and we play, 4 or 5 nights a week. And those are great because you get really good. And by
Yep.
the time you're at the end of a 3-week run, I don't know, at least with us, we're dangerous. We're sick.
Get in the rhythm. Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so and you know what? That goes away. If you only play once a month, that goes away. It does.
Yeah.
You're like, my hand hurts, after like 5 songs.
Yep. Got to get back into condition
But if
for it.
you're playing every night, you're like, it's so great. You have
Yeah.
to rest though. You have to rest. If you play 5 nights in a row, get a couple of days off or a day off, and then play 5 more, or 6 is the limit, man, for me now. A couple of years ago, we were on a tour with Everclear and we did 12 in a row. And I was like, well, other people, younger people would laugh at me right now.
Yeah.
But for real, man,
Yeah.
no, nuh-uh.
Yeah. It's still, that's a
Because
lot.
it's the same drill. It's the same drill in every town. And sometimes, say you had a good night the night before, you go to a place where it's like, oh my God, this place is a shithole. It's like not even a trash can in the dressing room. It's like, what are they trying to do? Anyway, I sound like an old man now.
No, that's all fair critiques. I mean, what was it like performing on all the late night shows?
Super fun, amazing, amazing. We did Conan O'Brien twice, and he was the guy who hang with you.
Yeah,
He was the guy who hung out.
that's cool.
Him and Andy were great, just great. David Letterman, I give him who he is and for how long he's been doing it. And yeah, he don't want to talk to you. Jay Leno, he called us up. He came into the dressing room, said hi, made a couple cracks about Texas, And then he said, shoot, yeah, hang on a second after you're done playing and come on over because all the guests are going to be gone. So come on over after you're done playing. And so we went over and we talked with Jay for, 5 minutes or whatever.
Yeah. Okay. What would you say,
Do them in
when
the afternoon, almost all of them.
okay.
You do it on a weekday in the afternoon, and then they air it later that night. They do a little bit of editing and, make sure that you didn't, perform a call to action, or something like that, or some kind of incendiary comment,
Sure. That's right.
a Tenacious D moment.
Yeah, that's right. No kidding. Yeah. That's
I hate to laugh, but I mean, God, here's my hot take on that.
yeah.
Come on, Gas. You've got a free ticket, man, and you just totally screwed it up.
Yep.
You got a
That
free
was
ticket.
yeah.
Know your place.
Yeah. Yeah. That was
Wow.
yeah. Pretty crazy headline to find that out. Yeah.
Wow. Anyway, that's just my take.
No, no, I
I'm not
totally
there. I'm not them, and I'm not there.
that's
So,
true. That's true. Yeah, their lives. So
and thank God, never got in trouble. See, that's another thing about not being too famous.
yes, that's also true.
Get away with more slip ups.
Yep. You're not under a microscope as much. That's for sure.
Right. Right. I'm anonymous. I can go to the grocery store. No problem.
Yeah. I
I can
feel like
go and it's playing my music.
that's true.
I'll be like,
You're like,
you're
oh, this song's great. You
important.
guys heard this song? It's
And my kid will go, whoa, which is cool.
yeah, I'm sure that's a great moment.
I got kids that are adults, and I got a kid who's a kid. So
Yeah.
it runs the gamut age wise. So where are we? Are we going to talk about history? No, I didn't think we
I mean,
would.
we well, I mean, you're kind of history in a way to a certain extent. So
Thank you. Wow, I'm a historical figure. That's fantastic.
yeah.
I
I
can
mean,
speak to my times. I could speak to some times before that. Do you know, I have a theory. This may be a little bit too obscure for anybody,
sure, go for it.
unless they're part of a certain scene that I feel like Fastball is part of, and that's bands that the Spanish love. Okay.
Interesting. Okay.
Spain. Okay. Not all of them, obviously, not hardly any of them, really. Just a sort of subset of Spanish culture, popular culture, really loves authentic rock and roll, played with guitars, and they love the whole folklore, Rolling Stones to the Ramones to the
Yeah.
Jam and the Sex Pistols and the Stooges and the Flaming Groovies. They love all this sort of they love all the music that I love, which is amazing. And so my thought is, how did this happen? Why do they find this attraction to this sort of culture, this rock and roll rebellious culture? And I believe it has something to do with fascism
Yeah. Yeah.
and growing up who's with parents who lived under Franco
Yep.
and who lived under a shadow of oppressive, violent authority. And, I don't think rock and roll was permitted in
Yeah.
1959.
Probably not. Yeah.
No, I think you could go to jail for that kind of thing. So, and I know it's true for some of the other side of the political spectrum.
Sure.
On the left, you had places like Czechoslovakia where there was a band who was literally banned and thrown in prison called the Plastic People of the Universe.
Yeah.
And talk about, cultural oppression, which is something I'd like to, give a vague and brief warning about.
Yep, that's probably a good idea. Yeah.
Yeah, enjoy what you have because you may not be able to have those freedoms. Who
Yeah.
knows? I don't.
Yeah. No, I think that's
I
a
don't know.
totally valid point. Yeah.
I know that I will walk around with my eyes wide open at all times, and I will just try to enjoy the rest of my life and
Yeah.
to try to set a good example for the people around me that, need a strong um, figure.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's true. I mean, yeah, it could be interesting, to talk to people 30 years from now who have just begun their musical careers today and say, hey, what was it like performing, you know, in that era? So,
Right. It's weird because I've been back when I was a kid on TV, they had shows like the Midnight Special or Don Kirshner's rock concert where they talked about the industry even and you sort of got a rough idea of how things worked. And but the funny thing is they'd always have acts like, here he is, Little Richard. Okay. And it's 1972, but Little Richard's playing and he's considered by 1972 this man who recorded hits on the radio back in the mid 50s is considered ancient. I mean, old. Right? Jerry Lee Lewis, Elvis
yep.
Presley's in Vegas and he's old and all the people are there, all these cougars, millions of cougars every year going to see, you know Elvis. So what's funny is that was only 15 years removed. We are now 50 years removed from when I first picked up a guitar.
Yeah.
And we're about 45 years from when I first started playing in rock bands at, keg parties, you know,
Time moves on.
going to clubs and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And, I guess I am. I'm a relic. But it's funny. I don't feel like one. And I feel the music as much as I ever did. I dig it. I can still carry a tune. I can still go for 90 minutes. You know, it's pretty athletic playing bass and singing the kind of music I
Yeah.
sing.
I mean, that's awesome. I feel like that's the kind of, ideal situation to have where people can still do what they love for such a long period of time and be
Yeah.
good at it. So,
Yeah. I feel like I'm good at it. I do
no,
enjoy it.
definitely. Yeah.
So going back to so that's my Spanish uh, fascism
Yeah.
theory. But I don't know, our whole thing is the reason rock and roll came to be. I don't believe it would have come to be without Adolf Hitler and creating this giant emergency, global emergency, along with the other, hangers on of empire, that whole thing. It was like they have to do this for some reason. They have to stay dominant in some way. And it created a change that created cross pollination between the continents. So, why did Keith Richards and Mick Jagger exchange record albums from the American,
Sure.
labels? And how did they get them? They got them from the people on the ships.
Yeah.
The ships came, and people like Nems. Do you know what Nems was? Nems was a music company created by the uh, the Beatles manager,
Oh, okay.
Brian. What's his name? Anyway, that was his record store, and he had a specialty of ordering. His whole thing was that he ordered things that people asked for, and he would buy. He's like, well, two people asked for it, then I'm going to get it, and I'll get 10 copies. You know what I mean? It's that kind of stuff, and that happened because of all the shipping that developed because of World War II.
Yeah.
bringing and the cross pollination of having American bomber crews, and then the staging of Normandy, all those American soldiers, young people. Uh, there you go. Plus, what about the black jazz musicians in France? That kind
Yeah.
of thing, too, people like Charlie Parker uh, could go to Paris and be treated like the musical genius he was, instead of having to go in through the back door.
Well, I mean, I get the kind of just wrapping up then, what would you say is like your favorite moment from your career thus far?
This one.
This one? Okay, wow. Wow. All
This has
right.
been really fun, Ben. I have to say, I'm
Yeah.
being completely honest, and I was wondering how it would go, and I just opened myself to it, and I've really enjoyed this conversation.
Well, I mean, I really appreciate you, taking the time to come on and share, all your knowledge about music history and in your career. I mean, it is really interesting to be able to look back and see, kind of how we got to the point we are today musically and kind of the role the 90s played and so it's always very cool.
Cool. I'm glad that I fulfilled your desires.
And do you have any current things you're working on?
I am working on trying to get some new songs together. And I believe Miles is doing the same thing. He's out on a sort of a road trip vacation type thing with his girlfriend. And I'm hoping that we can come up with some more material soon so we can maybe go in the studio again
Yeah,
by the by winter. That'd be fun.
definitely.
Um, it's been a while since we finished this record, frankly. I mean, it's been a while. And I want everybody to know about our new album, Sonic Ranch, is on uh, Sunset Boulevard Records. It's it was recorded out in West Texas at a place called Sonic Ranch. It's a studio. It's a fantastic place to make records. State of the art equipment and rooms and design, and it's a good hang. It's isolated, so you're not really distracted in any way. If you're hungry, there's a house. It's like a, what do they call it? A hacienda. Because there's a courtyard with a pool, and then all these like residential rooms on either side of the courtyard. And in the front is a kitchen and a main house where everybody gets together and they have breakfast for you. Um, Mexican breakfast. It's right on the border. It's right on the Rio Grande. And Mexican ladies make amazing deliciosos for everybody. Huevos rancheros and, all that good stuff. Good coffee. But yeah, so talking about food, but the record is, I believe, one of our bests. And if you haven't heard it yet, check it out. You can check it out on all the streams. Apple Music, Spotify. You can order it through Amazon. We have it on vinyl. We have it on CD. And, what more can I say?
Yeah. No, awesome. Well, yeah, thanks again for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Hey, thank you, Ben.